Ever stop to wonder if the way we even think about thinking is even right in the first place? That's kind of what we're diving into today.
Yeah, we're tackling the history of artificial intelligence, but not with like the usual robot overlord storyline, right? We're going way deeper, looking at how the very idea of intelligence has always been intertwined with technology.
And our guide for this deep dive is David Bates and his book, An Artificial History of Natural Intelligence. He makes a pretty bold claim right off the bat. There's no such thing as natural intelligence, only artificial. So what do you make of that?
Well, Bates argues that our minds aren't separate from the material world or the tools that we create. Those tools shape how we think. They constantly push our minds to adapt and evolve. It's a direct challenge to the idea that we're born with some kind of pure, innate intelligence.
Okay, so how does someone even begin to unravel, like, centuries of thought on intelligence? Where does Bates take us?
He starts with a familiar name, Descartes. We usually remember him for separating mind and body, but Bates digs a little deeper into Descartes' obsession with automata.
Automata, like those intricate clockwork machines. What's the connection to intelligence?
So Descartes saw the human body as this complex machine, right? And he believed that understanding its mechanics could unlock the secrets of the mind. He was really onto something with information processing, which is central to how both bodies and minds work.
So we just flesh and blood machines then?
Not quite, but the tools we create, they become extensions of our minds, and when those tools influence how we process information, they become part of what makes us intelligent. Our intelligence isn't solely biological. It emerges from this interplay of mind, body, and technology.
That's a pretty radical shift in perspective. Does Bates dig up any other philosophical heavy hitters who are, like, wrestling with these ideas?
Absolutely. Thinkers like Hobbes, Spinoza, and Leibniz were grappling with how the mind learns and impacts through experience. And they weren't just like theorizing from some ivory tower. They were really trying to understand the nuts and bolts of how experience shapes our thinking.
Okay, let's unpack their contributions a bit. What were their core arguments?
Well, Hobbes viewed the body as this wonderfully made machine, right? And he emphasized its natural order and how it influenced thought. Spinoza saw both mind and body as expressions of nature, interconnected and constantly influencing each other.
So they had different approaches, but they were united in the idea that the mind isn't static. It's shaped by outside forces.
Precisely. Even Leibniz, who called the mind a spiritual automaton, believed it reflected both the body and the world. He argued that understanding the body could unlock the secrets of the mind. And all of this was happening well before the Enlightenment.
This is already like reshaping how I think about thinking. Okay, so the Enlightenment arrives and reason takes center stage. Did that change the game?
So thinkers like Locke and Hume started focusing on how our habits physically mold our brains. Locke, for instance, believed attention wasn't innate but had to be trained, essentially forming a habit in the brain, which, kind of blurs the line between what's natural and what's cultivated through experience.
So even during the age of reason, they still saw the mind as something shaped by external forces.
Absolutely. Hume went further, exploring the nervous system and demonstrating how our physical bodies directly impact thought. Think about a time you tried to think rationally, but emotions or memories got in the way. Hume would say that's your nervous system interfering. He highlighted how deeply our physical and mental processes are entwined.
Yeah. It seems like we're chipping away at this idea of pure, untouched intelligence. But wasn't there a big push during the Enlightenment to reclaim the mind as separate from the material world? Didn't someone try to put the mind back on its pedestal?
You're thinking of Kant, right? Yeah, his ideas about reason were radical in their own way. He saw reason as something that emerges from our physical selves, but also transcends them. He believed the mind strived for unity, but that unity doesn't come from within.
It comes from outside. That's a pretty wild concept.
It is. And this sets the stage for even more radical ideas about how our minds interact with the world, especially the technologies we create. But we'll dive into that in our next episode.
All right, so I'm ready to pick up where we left off. We were on the verge of some seriously radical ideas about the mind, right? Something about external unity.
Yeah, so Kant, he argued that our minds, they crave order and unity, but it's not something that we're born with, right?
Yeah.
We create that unity through our experiences by processing and categorizing the world around us.
So it's like our brains are taking all the chaos of the world and trying to build a system out of it.
Exactly. And this is where Kant's ideas about judgment come in, and specifically what he called reflective judgment. It's how we make sense of things that don't fit neatly into our pre-existing categories.
Give me an example. How does that work in, like, real life?
Okay, so imagine you're faced with a problem that you've never encountered before, something with no clear solution. Reflective judgment is the process of figuring out how to even approach that problem, of finding order and meaning in the unfamiliar.
So we're not just passively, like, absorbing information. We're actively creating meaning, understanding. It's like our minds are constantly building something new, something artificial, even when we're trying to make sense of the natural world.
You're getting it. And this concept of the mind as an active creative force, this is central to Bates' argument. And he traces this idea through history, showing how thinkers from different fields and eras have grappled with it.
So where do we go next in this journey of the mind? Who picks up the torch from Kant?
Well, the 19th century brought some major upheavals, and one of the biggest game changers was Darwin. And, we all know about evolution, but we often overlook its implications for artificial intelligence.
Wait, Darwin and AI, that's not a connection you hear every day. What's the link?
So Darwin showed us that human evolution, it isn't just about biology, it's also about our unique ability to invent and use tools. He saw tools as extensions of ourselves, things that literally change how we interact with the world and, as Bates argues, how we think.
So it's not just survival of the fittest, it's survival of the most inventive. The better the tools, the more successful the species.
Exactly. Early humans who excelled at making and using tools, they were more likely to survive and pass on their genes. But here's where it gets really interesting. Those tools weren't just changing our, physical capabilities, they were also changing our minds.
So our tools become part of our cognitive process, part of what makes us intelligent. But how far back does this idea go? Were our cave-dwelling ancestors already laying the groundwork for artificial intelligence?
Maybe not consciously, but there are some fascinating theories about how tool-making impacted early human cognition. Imagine being able to store your memories outside your brain, like on an external hard drive.
Okay, that would be life-changing. I'd never forget a name or like a to-do list item again.
Right. Well, some researchers believe that early human tools, they acted as a kind of external memory. And the process of making and using these tools, it may have even changed the structure of the brain, leading to more complex thought and social organization.
So even back then, our tools were shaping our minds, essentially making us more intelligent.
Yeah, it's a compelling theory, and it highlights how deeply intertwined the history of technology and the history of intelligence really are. And this leads us to another intriguing idea that Bates explores: the mind as a leaky container.
A leaky container. Okay, now I'm really curious. What does that even mean?
It means our minds, they're not these closed-off, self-contained units. They're constantly being influenced by the thoughts, memories, and, yes, even the technologies of others. It makes you wonder how much of what we think is truly our own.
So, my thoughts might not be entirely mine. They're shaped by, the people around me, the books I read, the tech I use. It's like we're all sharing a mental space.
In a way, yes. We're part of this vast network of minds and technologies, and our individual thoughts are shaped by that network. It challenges our traditional understanding of individuality.
This completely reframes how we think about where ideas come from.
Yeah.
It's a bit humbling, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
But how does this connect back to artificial intelligence? If our minds are so permeable, where does the artificial even begin?
Exactly. If external factors, including technology, shape our minds, then artificial intelligence, it isn't just something out there in the realm of computers. It's happening within our own minds as we adapt to this, increasingly technological world.
So the line between human intelligence and artificial intelligence is blurring even on a cognitive level. But how did we get from early tools and leaky containers to the actual machines we now think of as AI? Was there a turning point?
There were several, but a significant one was the work of Charles Babbage and Ada Lovelace in the 19th century. Babbage is often called the father of the computer, but what's often overlooked is how his work with Lovelace challenged the very definition of thinking and calculating.
Wait, are you saying Ada Lovelace was contemplating artificial intelligence back in the 1800s? That seems like way ahead of its time.
Absolutely. Lovelace was this brilliant mathematician who saw beyond the number-crunching potential of Babbage's analytical engine. She believed it could be used to create art, music, even poetry. You could say she was one of the first to envision machines as capable of intelligent, creative thought.
That's incredible. So they weren't just inventing computers, they were redefining what it meant to think, to be intelligent. They were already pushing the boundaries of what machines could do.
Precisely. And this exploration of intelligence, it continued into the 20th century. Thinkers grappled with the implications of these increasingly sophisticated machines. One particularly fascinating figure is W. Ross Ashby, a psychiatrist and pioneer in cybernetics.
Cybernetics. That sounds a bit like something out of science fiction.
It kind of is. Cybernetics is the study of how systems, both natural and artificial, regulate and control themselves. Ashby was particularly interested in how systems learn and adapt, and he believed that breakdowns and errors were crucial to that process.
So making mistakes is actually a good thing. That's a refreshing perspective.
In a way, yes. Ashby argued that breakdowns, they give systems the opportunity to reorganize and become stronger, and he even built a machine called the homeostat to demonstrate this principle.
A machine that learns from its mistakes. That's incredible. But how does this tie back into intelligence being artificial?
Ashby's work shows that intelligence, whether in brains or machines, it's all about adaptation. It's not about being perfect or error-free, but about learning and growing from our experiences, including our mistakes.
So our brains are like constantly self-correcting systems, always rebooting and getting smarter.
Exactly. And this process of adaptation, of constantly reshaping our minds, this is what makes intelligence artificial in the sense that it's not something we're born with, it's something we cultivate through our interactions with the world and the technologies we create.
Wow, this is a lot to take in. We've covered so much ground, from cave paintings to cybernetics. But I have a feeling we're not done yet, are we? Where do we go from here?
You're right, there's much more to explore. In our next episode, we'll delve into how these ideas about the mind, technology, and artificial intelligence continue to evolve in the 20th and 21st centuries. We'll even take a peek into the future of intelligence, both human and artificial.
All right, ready to jump back into this whirlwind tour of intelligence. We've covered so much ground, from ancient philosophers to self-correcting machines. It's kind of amazing to see how these ideas have been building on each other for centuries.
It really is. It highlights how we're part of this much larger conversation, right? About the nature of thought and creativity. Where did we even... yes, the 20th century. Things really start to accelerate here.
With computers finally entering the scene.
Exactly. So after World War II, there was this surge of interest in understanding the brain through the lens of these new digital computers. It was like the computer became, the dominant metaphor for the mind.
So instead of clocks or engines, the brain became this information processing system.
Precisely. And this led to a boom in cybernetics, which we touched on with Ashby, and eventually the field of artificial intelligence as we know it today. But as Bates points out, there were different schools of thought, right, on how to even approach this relationship between human and machine intelligence.
Okay, so paint me a picture of this, post-war intellectual landscape. Who are some of the major players shaping this new era of thinking about intelligence?
Well, one towering figure is Alan Turing, famous for, cracking codes during World War II. But he was also this brilliant mathematician and a father of computer science.
Didn't he create a test for artificial intelligence?
He did. It's called the Turing test, where a machine tries to convince a human that it's also human through conversation. But what's fascinating about Turing is that he wasn't just trying to build machines that could, mimic us. He was wrestling with these deep philosophical questions about consciousness. Could machines truly think, or were they just, simulating thought?
Yeah, he was grappling with some seriously big questions. It seems like he was thinking decades ahead of his time. Were there others asking these kinds of, fundamental questions about the nature of intelligence?
Yeah, another key figure is J.Z. Young, a zoologist who challenged how we even viewed the brain. He argued against this idea of the brain as a static organ, right? And instead proposed it as this dynamic system, constantly changing, adapting through experience.
That sounds a lot like the plasticity we discussed with Kant and Ashby, this idea that our brains are shaped by our interactions with the world.
Exactly. Young's work solidified this understanding of the brain as incredibly flexible, adaptable, molded by our experiences, including our encounters with technology.
So we're seeing a clear thread here.
Yeah.
From Descartes' automata to Turing's computers, there's this consistent idea that the mind isn't fixed or isolated. It's in constant dialogue with the world around it, especially the tools we create.
Precisely. And this brings us to, I think, a really crucial point that Bates emphasizes. If our minds are so intertwined with the tools we use, what happens as technology becomes increasingly sophisticated?
I have a feeling the answer is a bit more nuanced than just like we get smarter.
You're right. This is where Bates's book gets really interesting. He argues that we've entered this era of technogenesis, where technology isn't merely shaping our minds, it's becoming like integral to our cognitive processes.
Okay, I need a concrete example. What does technogenesis look like in our everyday lives?
Think about smartphones, right? We rely on them for everything. Navigation, communication, entertainment, even just like remembering where we parked our cars. They've become extensions of our minds, almost like external organs.
I know, I would be lost without mine. Literally.
Exactly. And that's precisely Bates' point. Smartphones are so ingrained in our lives now that they're no longer just tools, right? They're shaping how we think, how we experience the world. They're impacting our memories, our attention spans, even our social interactions. We're merging with our technology in a way.
So we're on the path to becoming cyborgs. Like something out of science fiction. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Well, Bates explores this provocative idea in detail, and he argues that it's not necessarily a bad thing. This merging of human and machine intelligence, it could lead to new forms of creativity, new ways of understanding the world, even new ways of being human. It's about recognizing the potential while also being mindful of the risks.
Okay, that's a more optimistic outlook than I usually hear about AI. It's not just about robots taking over the world.
Not at all. But it does require us to be thoughtful, proactive. How do we navigate this new era of technogenesis? How do we ensure this merging of minds and machines leads to a positive future?
Those are some big questions. What guidance does Bates offer?
He reminds us that the future isn't predetermined, right? It's something that we're creating, like right now. We need to embrace the fact that intelligence is ever evolving, both in ourselves and in the machines we create. It's not about humans versus machines, it's about humans and machines kind of co-evolving.
So the key is to find ways to coexist, to collaborate with these new forms of intelligence.
Exactly. And this coevolution, it could lead to a future where intelligence isn't confined to our skulls, but distributed across these networks of humans and machines working together. Imagine the possibilities.
It's an exciting, if slightly daunting, vision of the future. But Bates also mentioned, the potential downsides of technology. How do we make sure we're steering this ship in the right direction?
Well, he urges us to be mindful, right, of how technology influences our thinking and to make conscious choices about how we use it. We need to ensure it enhances our humanity, not, diminishes it. It's not just about building smarter machines, but about building a smarter, more compassionate and sustainable future for everyone.
That's a powerful message and a perfect note to end on, I think. We've covered some incredible territory today, from ancient Greece to the digital age, all united by this quest to understand what it means to be intelligent. Any final thoughts for our listeners before we sign off?
Remember, your intelligence, it isn't fixed. It's a work in progress, shaped by your experiences, your relationships, and yes, even your smartphone. Embrace that process, be mindful of its power, and use it to create a future where intelligence in all its forms can thrive.
That's a wrap on this deep dive into the artificial history of natural intelligence. We've learned that thinking is much more complex and fascinating than we often realize. Until next time, keep those minds curious and engaged.